I've been in business for 13 years. I've sold 9 companies. My last company I sold for $46.2 million. I own acquisition.com, which right now does about $17 million a month across our portfolio. I'm going to compress 13 years of brutal business truths and lessons into this one video. Brutal business truth number 1. Sell to rich people until you have the money to sell all the poor people. The middle is where you get killed. Elon said, you can either do a lot of good for a small amount of people or a little good for a large amount of people. And I will tell you personally, it's way harder to do a little good for a lot of people than a lot of good for a small amount of people. There is a reason that Tesla started at the top. They started only selling to rich people. They had the Roadster, which is $250,000. And so they sold those, and then he was able to go down market one and sell $100,000 cars to just upper echelon of society, the wealthy. And then after that, he made the X, which is a little bit cheaper than that. And then underneath of that, he made the Model 3, which was going to be the mass model, right? And each time, it was significantly harder to do the one before, because if you want to sell based on value in terms of low cost, you need to build the infrastructure for huge amounts of demand, because the only way that you make money selling to poor people is selling tons and tons and tons of them. Look at Walmart. Look at Amazon. These are businesses that were built for volume day one, and they win on efficiency. That was the whole point. Amazon, he wanted to have the best selection and the lowest prices. Walmart, everyday low prices. They win on efficiencies. Like, they all fly coach. They use fold-out chairs. They drink out of paper cups. They purposely breed the culture of efficiency because it's the only way that you can win if you sell to poor people. And I say poor people to be hyperbolic in terms of my language so that it drives the point home. Obviously, I buy from Amazon. But the point is that the strategy is based on volume. And you've probably heard some of my other tweets around this, which is solve rich people problems, they pay better. Or if you solve rich people problems, you get to charge rich people prices. This is what I think the key insight is that to someone who only has $1,000, when they pay you $100, they pay you 10% of their net worth. Their expectations of what they're going to get for that $100 is the same as a rich person giving you 10 million of their $100 million. It would be gigantic, right? In terms of their expectations. But getting a rich person to give you $100, they might not even notice. And so the thing is that it's actually easier in some ways to solve rich people problems because they're willing to pay more in an absolute sense for lower relative value. And so with that extra profit or gross margin, you can absolutely over deliver for them and still make money and not have to learn all these things with infrastructure. So for example, if I wanted to start a bank, I would have to have $25 to $100 million to start it up. But if you do that, then you have to build the infrastructure so that you can handle money for zillions and zillions and zillions of people. A very hard business to get into. And so the idea is that you want to sell, at least this is my belief, is that you want to sell premium. You want to sell to wealthy people. You want to sell to a niche person that you can do a lot of good for in a very small slice because you don't have to compete against everyone. You can have inefficiencies and still make money without having to have tremendous infrastructure and skill around building it. Once you make a ton of money doing that, you can obviously just do more of that, which big fan. Or you say, you know what, the next thing I do, I want to do for zillions and zillions of people. And so then you build a business like a Netflix that, think about how insane Netflix is. Just as a concept, you pay $13 or $15 a month or whatever it is now, and they create movies and shows, and they spend millions of dollars, and they sign comedians, and they've got all these shows that are streaming, and you pay $14 a month. It's absurd. Think about if you said, hey, mom and dad, I want to start this video subscription, and I'm going to just pay millions of dollars to get all these shows and movies made for us, and I'm just going to charge $14. It would be absurd. That's how much value you have to provide to someone who doesn't have money to capture huge slices of the market. How are you going to beat Prime? $99 a year or $129 a year, whatever it is now, right? And with Prime, you get basically all of Netflix with Prime Video. You also have next day shipping, same day shipping with anything that you want to buy. $99 a year, $129 a year. If you build to sell to the masses, you need to build like you're going to sell to the masses. And you're usually going to have to put a ton of money in for a long period of time because you have to have that infrastructure up front to deal with that volume, to have such a crazy value discrepancy that someone who has no money still never wants to cancel. That's the key. Whereas if you go to wealthier people, you can get a premium. You can have 5 clients that all pay you $5,000 a month and make an amazing income and have the resources to actually do a good job and hire a couple people to help you out who are competent. And you can do that when you charge more money. And those people are not the ones who are like, and everybody's seen this meme where the $50 a month customer is like, hey, so for this $50 a month, what am I going to get? Now, we make fun of that. That's the reality of if you're taking 5% of someone's paycheck, it means a lot to them. Whereas if you're going to somebody who's making $1 million a month and they pay you $5,000, if they get one good thing a year, they're stoked. And they're like, oh yeah, I sent the wire. Did you get it? Like the difference between working with somebody who's on the lower end versus the higher end. And so being very clear about who you serve, not serving other people, going down market only if you have the infrastructure to support huge amounts of volume and usually the capital to front it. Either you build for volume day one and win on efficiency like Amazon or Walmart, or you build for a premium, which means you niche down and you completely solve problems for people. So you completely solve a problem in a very narrow niche. And so let me give you a completely polar opposite examples here, which I literally live on both sides of the spectrum. On one side, acquisition.com is my premium brand, right? This is the brand that we do deals with. This is where we have $100 million companies and stuff that we invest in, that we own it, right? That's my family office. And we do 1 or 2 deals a year. Just to be really real, we make very rich people way wealthier, right? That's what I do there. So someone comes in is already worth $50 million and we're like, cool, how do we get to 250? And that's what we invest in. That's what we scale the company. On the other extreme, we've got school. So school is for everyone who's starting out. Now, school took 5 years to get to the level of product that it is now, and millions and tens of millions of dollars of development where it lost money the entire time and still loses money right now in order to create such an absurd value for the $99 a month or whatever it is. Because we know that $99 a month for somebody who's trying to start their business, that's the entirety of their business budget. And so we have to solve all of the business problems that those people have at that level. And so these are two completely, honestly, the most polar extremes of value creation in terms of who we're selling to or who we advertise to and who we're attracting and how we help them. And so there's no coincidence that I did acquisition.com before investing in being a co-owner of school, because I had to make enough money to be able to afford to sell to people who don't have much, to be able to help build the infrastructure and invest millions of dollars to build that so that we could accommodate millions and millions of users. Right now, we have many millions of users on the platform. If you are confused about how to sell rich people stuff, first off, the easiest hack for selling to rich people is do what somebody else is doing that sells to rich people and do it in half the time and charge twice the price. Number one, rich people pay for time above all else. But if we look at the value equation, you've got the outcomes. You got to make sure they want the outcome that you're promising. And then you've got the 3 other variables. You've got risk. How likely is it that they're going to get what they want when they buy? Time, delay between when they buy and when they get, and the effort and sacrifice. The richer they are, the more guaranteed they want it to be. Now, you don't have to guarantee things, but you need the perception of the guarantee. That's why reputation matters. If you're the best plastic surgeon in the world, you don't give a guarantee. They just have a high perceived likelihood of achievement. They believe that if they pay you, the likelihood that their nose isn't fucked up when they do the surgery is high. If time delay, they want it to be as fast as possible. If they give you money and have it tomorrow, rich people pay a lot of money for that. And then you've got effort and sacrifice. Well, I don't want to do anything. I want you to do everything. And so the thing is that a lot of times it makes sense to have very white glove, concierge, high touch things for people who are willing to pay for it, because for them, the incremental difference in cost for them is actually very small. So the difference between $5,000 a month and $10,000 a month to a multimillionaire, not a huge difference. But if you're just better for $10,000 a month, they'll happily pay you than the $5,000 a month guy. You're not going to sell someone who's wealthy on how much money you're going to save them. You'll sell someone who's wealthy on how much time you're going to save them. Brutal business truth number 2. You lack priorities, not information. Problems are easy to solve if you know what you're after, if you know what problem you're actually trying to solve. I'll tell you a story. So I was talking to an entrepreneur who's doing about $10 million a year, and that was between all of his companies. And we were talking, and they mentioned one, and then he mentioned a second, they mentioned a third, they mentioned a fourth. I was like, dude, how many companies do you have? And he's like, oh, I don't know. I was like, you don't know? He's like, yeah, I have an Excel sheet. And so I was like, well, pull it up. And so he pulled up his Excel sheet, and he had like 56 companies that in total were making like $10 million a year. And obviously one of them was the biggest one that was doing like half of that revenue. And that was actually the company that I had heard of that he founded. And I said, dude, if you just only had that one company, how easy would it be to like 5x that business? He was like, oh my God, if I didn't have these other 55 companies, it'd be a joke. I was like, so if I waved a magic wand and that happened, you think you could do it? And he was like, yeah. And I was like, then do it. You can wave the magic wand. You can end these other 55 partnerships so that you can do this one thing. And what's crazy is that a year later, I talked to him and he had done just that. He was like, dude, I didn't sleep for 3 days after we talked because I was like, oh my God, that's it. So I see strategy as priority. It's prioritization of resources, right? You have unlimited options, but you have limited resources, time, money, people, etc. And so how you choose to allocate those resources against the unlimited options is your strategy. It is how you prioritize. And when you have one clear goal for one clear company, for one clear customer, the prioritization actually gets pretty easy. And so a lot of people keep looking for these unique insights when the reality is you don't even have a goal. Have you defined the problem that you're trying to solve? And most people haven't. And that ends up being usually the first question I ask someone. They're like, hey, I'm stuck with my business. And I just say, well, what's the goal? And then they say something. I say, well, what problem are you solving right now? And so if you can't clearly state current state, desired state, obstacle, you're running around like a chicken with your head cut off. You're not going to solve anything. You're going to do a lot of work, but you're not going to move forward. So I had a media company approach me. They've got 40 million subscribers across their channels, obviously very, very good at media. They said, hey, we've been listening to your content and we think that our constraint, like the problem that we need to solve that will get us the most bang for the buck, is that we need to optimize our SOPs for the media company. I said, okay, well, what's the goal? I was like, is it to just get more famous or is it to make money? And they're like, no, we want to shift into monetization now. I was like, okay. So let me ask you this, what product do you sell? And they were like, well, we don't have a product. I was like, okay. So hear me out, crazy idea. If you had a product, you would make a lot more money than trying to get your 97 out of 100 media company to 98.5. Not to say that there's nothing, like if they said, I want to be more famous, then I would have said, absolutely, you should do that. That makes sense because monetization isn't the goal. But if they were trying to make money, they had nothing to sell. And I promise you, if you have nothing to sell, you make a lot less money than if you do have something to sell. And so they could be a 2 out of 10 on product, but with that amount of media, that amount of traffic, they would be able to get so many sales that they would blow it out of the water. And so they were spending all this time trying to get into the intricacies, trying to get information on how to solve the wrong problem. And so most times it's not that you lack insight, it's that you're solving the wrong thing. And I think the reason that happens so frequently is because those entrepreneurs are media entrepreneurs. They like media. They feel comfortable in media. And so they like solving media problems. And so they like solving problems that they know how to solve because they've solved them before. I'll tell you a different story. I had a guy who came out for a workshop here at acquisition.com, and he said, hey, can you go over the closer framework? And I said, okay, you flew across the country. You've been here for a day. You had this one opportunity to ask this question to me. I was like, is sales a problem in your business? What's your close rate? He said 40%. I said, so sales is not the constraint of your business. He was like, no. I was like, then why are you asking me about the closer framework? And I actually think that lesson was way more powerful than me trying to go over the closer framework, because the reality is he was a sales guy. He loves selling. And so he wanted to hear me talk about sales, but sales isn't the problem in his business. There's something else that's the problem. He might not be getting enough leads, or people are churning out too quickly on the back end, or he can't even take on more customers because he doesn't have enough team. Like, those are all other examples of problems that might exist. And I'll bet you one of those 3 probably is the problem in his business, but that wasn't the question he asked. He asked about the thing that he enjoyed reading about, the thing he enjoyed learning about. And so right now, if you're an entrepreneur, it is true that you want to double down on your strengths, but the business as a whole has to be balanced. So hear me out. If you think about business like a body, okay, and you're a bodybuilder, and so you want to have ideal ratios for everything. In terms of, like, if your arms were like this big and your quads were tiny, then you look weird, right? So you want to be a specialist. Like, you, sure, as an individual contributor, keep doubling down on your strengths, but the business as a whole will only be as strong as its weakest link. And so this is where people get confused with double down on your strength versus be well balanced. The business needs to be balanced. Your physique in total needs to be balanced. But you as an individual contributor can double down on your strengths. You want a team of people who are all doubling down on their strengths, but you as the organizer of the business need to make sure that the business as a whole is balanced. Otherwise, it will get constrained at some point, and then that point will be your point of failure. That will be the weak link. That will be the part of the bridge where only $1 can get across, even though you've got 10x the front end and 10x the back end. That one bottleneck is what's bottlenecking the business. And so making sure that oftentimes the thing that you're not the most excited about, if you're a marketing entrepreneur, marketing is probably not your problem. If you're a product-driven entrepreneur, product's probably not your problem. If you hate people, and that's probably your issue. Like, I hate meetings, I hate leading people, I hate trying to reinvest my team. I'll bet you that you probably are having limits on your business because you don't know how to recruit, hire, train, manage. And so that's actually what you need to either learn or recruit someone who already knows how to do that. And so people spend too much time mentally masturbating to the concepts that they love, in the idea that because it worked to get them to where they're at, because they needed to start marketing to make money, they think, okay, now if I 10x marketing, that's what it takes to make more money. And unless that's the constraint, that's not true. And oftentimes businesses do grow to the constraint of the founder. They do grow to the constraint of that individual founder's highly specialized skill. And then at that point, it's constrained with something else that the founder doesn't like as much. And so either you got to learn it and get comfortable learning stuff that you don't like as much initially, or you got to find someone who does. And so if you're like, okay, well, I'm either a product entrepreneur and I need more marketing, or I'm a marketing entrepreneur and I need more product, or I'm either of those things and we don't have an operator, we have somebody who likes to lead and manage people and invest in teams, then how do you know what good looks like? So first off, one of the biggest advantages of business of doing this for a while is you start to recognize patterns. So you hire 5 guys that suck and then finally find a 6th, then all of a sudden you're like, okay, so this is what a good sales director looks like. This is why the businesses, for example, that we start now grow so much faster, because 1, we know who's going to be needed next, and 2, we know what that person looks like. And so think about how much time you save, where if the constraint, let's say, is sales, and you hire onboard train and that takes a month, and then that person sucks and it takes you 6 months to fire them, and then you do it again, and that takes another 6 months to fire them, and you do it again, and then this time it works. Well, you just wasted a year and change of growth that you should have been growing, but you weren't because you're the wrong person at the point of constraint. And realistically, this is why so many businesses get stuck. And the wrong conclusion is the person says, oh, I tried hiring sales directors. That doesn't work. No, you tried hiring John, and John sucked. It doesn't mean that there is no sales director. It doesn't mean you're the special snowflake that no one can ever replace you, or that no one can do this role. It's just that you can't. Like, there's Microsoft, there's Facebook, there are gajillion-dollar companies. Someone out there on earth is better than you literally at the thing that you're best at, and definitely better than the thing that you suck at. Now, how do you actually tactically find these people when you don't have the experience? So I'll give you the tactics how I think about this. 1 is I interview lots of people. And so if you think about the interview process as an education process, in asking them as much as you possibly can, act like an ignoramus. Just be like, I don't know anything about this. Tell me about it. And then don't then immediately jump on the first person. Go on 10 dates, go on 20 dates. I'll give you a little sideline story. For school, Sam, the founder, interviewed 600 developers before he found his co-founder. 600. And the way that he did that is the process that I'm outlining. So first he said, hey, who here knows anything about development in his network? So he started interviewing those developers. And then he said, hey, can you introduce me to the best developers you know? And so then those people introduced him because they had a better context. He's like, I'm not hiring any of you. I want to know the best people you know. And so eventually he kept going up the ladder of, he talked to those people and say, who's the best one you know? And he kept going up and kept going up, only to fact find, only to find information, until he found somebody who was like, oh my gosh, this guy has said more things and made more sense. And at this point in the process, he'd already spoken to so many people, he had a good context from which to make a judgment. And so that is the process. I will tell you what I personally look for now. I look for the quantity and quality of metrics that someone has to describe their role. And so I'll give you a binary example. So on one hand, if I was hiring someone for customer success, let's say that's like you're getting a lot of churn, you're not getting a lot of ascensions, you're not getting good reviews, your NPS scores are low, et cetera. You're then saying, okay, Mr. Customer Success candidate, tell me about customer success. What metrics do you measure? Now, if they say like, I just want to make sure people are happy, that they're having a good, they're good time, and that they're getting results and they're having a good experience, I'd be like, cool, well, what do you measure? And if they start squirming around like, well, what do you measure? And they can only come up with 1 or 2 things, then I already know that this person obviously can't drive an outcome because they can't even define an outcome. Now, on the flip side, if that person says, okay, well, we like to define an activation metric up front that we can do within the first 48 hours. Then we have like, what is our time to value and what's our North Star there? We also like to measure CSAT, but I don't like to do it too often because then customers don't like filling out the surveys. And so we want to make sure that we can do it ideally within the customer journey during a value-driven exchange that they're going to have with a customer service rep or some sort of account rep that they have to manage. And then we can just tack it into that process. I like to look at churn, but churn I see more as a lagging indicator. And I look at these other things, especially what's our time, like how long does it take from sale to onboarding? What's that handoff look like? What percentage of customers are backing out in the first 24 hours, 48 hours, 72 hours? And what percentage of these customers are leaving us a review by day 30? And so all of a sudden I'm like, okay, well, he just said like 9 different metrics and had reasoning for that. And so then the follow-up to this question of understanding the quality and quantity of the metrics that someone's going to bring to the table is awesome. This is going to freak some people out. how does what you do make the business money? And if the person cannot accurately describe how they're functioning, because every function of a business makes a business money. That's why the function exists. Now, the thing is that some functions of a business are indirect versus direct. So if I asked a CFO, how do you make the business money? They should say multiple things. Well, one, I control expenses. So everything that I save goes to the bottom line, and I have a process of consistently cutting out excess costs every 30 days. And so by doing that, I can usually drive an extra 3 to 5% to the bottom line, which more than pays for me. So I'm like, okay, great. They're already even thinking about my return as an owner versus them. On top of that, they say, okay, also, I see finance really as a function of decision-making. And so if we can collect the metrics that drive decisions around what things have the highest gross margins, what's our utilization rates, how can we make the decisions that will get us the highest return on capital, both human and money capital in the business, then we will grow faster. And so if someone talks like that, then I'm like, okay, they understand how finance is actually a data function. By the way, it is. Literally, that's what finance does. This gives you reports, it's reporting, so that you can make decisions about the business so that we make more money. Cool. Now, sales is going to say like, and I'll give you an example for a sales director. So if I say, hey, how does what you do make us more money? Now, if they say, well, I'm gonna drive sales, I'd be like, well, duh. But like, you're not going to sell anyone because you're a director. So how do you make the company more money? What you want them to say is that I'm going to increase the average conversion percentage across our leads for the team, because that is the output of the sales manager is closing percentage. Like at a fundamental rate, it's closing percentage is one of the metrics, but just total conversion rate of leads. So if I get 100 leads and there's lots of mini steps, you got to schedule, you got to show, you got to close, you got to offer, whatever, there's cash collected, there's other mini metrics along the way, but you just want to see what percentage of eyeballs and or earballs and people who give us their information we can contact, do we convert into sales? And if you say, I, as a sales director, will be able to increase that percentage, then that's the job. And that's how I make the business more money. Because here's the thing, if they cannot describe an output of their job that ties to revenue for the business or ties to profit for the business, then you can be absolutely certain that they don't know how to do it and that they're not going to do it for you because they can't even tell you how it works. And so I use those as the litmus test. One, I interview as many people as I possibly can so I can get a basis from which to make a judgment. Two, from there, I'll learn the metrics because I won't know them, that people use to describe the role to drive outcomes. And I will look for the quantity and quality of metrics that people will track and what they would do to influence those metrics, step 2. And then step 3, how does what you do make the company more money? Don't let them get away with like with the sales example, well, we're going to make more sales. No, but how do you influence that? Business